start recording and we can say hi to Nicola, who's there.
Hello.
Hi, how are you? You okay this week?
Yeah, not bad, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, good. And Roz should be around, so would probably Adam and Alison. But they might be joining, or maybe they just can't make it. There is a lot going on. So we'll sort of begin because it's just starting class time. So everyone's okay this week. Is there anything, it's always nice, like I remember going to classes where the teacher would offer an opportunity, because it's actually, obviously this is going out to other people, but there's an opportunity because there's only, 3 of us here, or 4 of us. You could probably just say to me, if there's anything that you specifically want to work on, like if we've got tighter shoulders, or if we've got maybe, last week we were looking at twisting and finding that movement. Obviously we'll be doing all the stuff that we normally do, but is there anything that you guys feel like you need to kind of open or to release or create space around now? Or anyone got any requests at the beginning of class? That's the wording I'm looking for.
Yeah, I would say definitely shoulders. I really notice it. Tuesday is my first working day of the week, and it's really noticeable that I've spent a day at my desk and my shoulders are so painful.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, yeah. So we'll definitely do some of that. I've got a nice little sequence, a simple little sequence, which it's called Breath of Joy. So that's kind of quite nice. We can work through that. And it's a nice one to do to intersperse during the working day. So little movement breaks, really helpful. And hopefully you can maybe even just bring that into the rest of the week. And take kind of regular little movement breaks. The other thing that I've been reading more about recently is called an ultradian, I think it's ultradian or ultradian maybe with a D, rhythm. So we know, we're probably all familiar with the circadian rhythm, like the cycles and the day and night and how we sleep and yeah. So the ultradian rhythm is where we have a cycle of activity and rest throughout the day. So we have an active period and then a resting period. And it approximately goes in about 90 minutes, 90 to 120 minute periods, where you then have, here's Ali, you then have about 10 minutes of rest. Now, if we go through that kind of, and obviously for kids it's slightly different, their attention spans are like, well, depending on their age and the activity, like 20 minutes max, but with us there is a known rhythm and a cycle for around 90 minutes of activity and then requiring about 10 minutes of resting. So resting could be just taking a breath and maybe changing the sight from being more short kind of range to looking away. One of the things we do quite frequently throughout the day, my husband and I, is go up to the top garden just to take a 10-minute break every so often. It could be going for a little bit of a walk, a relaxing walk. It doesn't have to be vigorous because obviously we're looking at active and then passive. So just having a break, maybe making a cup of tea, and when we don't acknowledge that or honor that rhythm, we start to throughout our day, we start to tap into resources that would drain us in the long run. Now, I know how hard this is because I'm always learning and teaching myself around it, but it's very important to take breaks. Little movement breaks can be that more passive approach. It's very healthy for us, and we tap into resources that start to drain us, or we start to use, instead of noticing when we're tired and taking a break, we notice when we're tired and we go and make a coffee for ourselves to stimulate ourselves. So we're using external stimulants to work through that natural rhythm that is actually part of us. So it's worth considering that, just integrating a little bit of a movement break, a little bit of, twisting, rotation, side bending, and breath work to break up the time that we're spending. And it's the same with kids, like, you know, Zoe, thinking about you working with kids. I mean, I know how hard it is to find space when you're working with children, especially. I can't imagine what it must be like having a class of them. But you know, hopefully there's time just to breathe, and even integrating that with the kids, just taking a breath break. I borrowed my husband's watch because I'm trying to figure out whether my watches are dead, basically, and I need a new watch, and it gives me breath reminders. You know, it's like, okay, it's time to breathe, and I'm like, oh, okay. So, you know, teaching our kids that from now as a skill is really, really beneficial. There's a lot of science based behind all of that. Anyway, I'm not going to go on anymore talking. I think hi Alison and Adam, hopefully you guys are okay. You don't have to come off mute unless you want to. We're going to begin. We're actually going to begin in standing. So I'll just take us there. I'm just going to mute everybody and then we'll come to standing. So just making sure you've got space around you, especially if you're sharing the space, because we're going to begin. I'm just going to check. I think I've left my phone. Yeah, I don't have it in here, but I'm just going to check that wasn't my computer making that noise. No, do not disturb, so it's fine. And then, oops, cannot minimize when you're in. Forgotten to mute everybody. Sorry, guys. Come on, the system's changed slightly. I'm getting lost. There we go. Okie dokie. So I pinned my video. So we're going to come to standing. And we're going to begin with our feet just a bit wider than hip distance apart. And you can keep a couple of layers on until we warm up. I'm just going to keep my top on. And what's quite nice here is that we've got a bend in the knees, and we're just going to start actually by kind of shaking. We don't have to do it in any particular way, but breathing in through the nose and sighing it out through the mouth. Sorry, this might be really annoying with my mic as well. Sorry, I hadn't thought of that. I was deciding on doing these kind of shakes, shake, shake, shake today, because it feels really good to find this movement. And these can also be your little movement breaks. And again, I can see myself, so it looks a bit ridiculous if I start to think about it too much, but don't. Just kind of maybe even close the eyes and just feel how good it feels to kind of shake your body. And you can lift your arms up and kind of shake the head, the throat, the hands, the arms, down through the crown of the head, down the spine, and feel, you know, all those little wobbly bits that move, maybe around the thighs, and shake one foot and shake the other. So you're just kind of coming into your body, finding the breath, and then let the hands come back. So your feet are now going to ground, and the hands are going to come back either side of your body, and the arms are going to be like two kind of empty shirt sleeves. And they're just going to gently roll out from the shoulders as you keep that little bend in the knees. So just settling down the movement, starting to, almost like when you shake a snow globe and then you put it down on the side, everything starts to kind of settle. So that's that vigorous shaking. And then all you're going to do is just take the hands into little gentle fists and allow the hands to gently tap onto the kidney area. So this is really helpful for our adrenals, for relaxing and allowing us to come into our relaxation rather than being in stress response. So it's just waking up that energy in the kidneys. And of course, our adrenal glands sit on top of the kidneys. So just bringing our awareness to that area and letting the hands tap, 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 sort of waking them up in a nice gentle way. Good. And then we're going to let that movement release the arms, tiny smaller circles. Okay, let that movement come back to stillness. Just closing the eyes and keeping your awareness in your feet. So just without moving your feet, or maybe you do want to just look at your feet and glance down and move them a little bit. And then just settling into the awareness in your feet. So just allowing a little rocking forwards and back. Notice if the natural pattern that has come about is a sort of rounding and arching. So if your fingertips, just take your awareness to your fingertips, and if they're more on the front of the thighs, see if you can take your shoulders and roll them up and back, and let the fingertips instead dangle on the outer edges, what I would call the IT band, the edge of the outer edge of the thighs. And you might want to do that a few times. So you're just rolling and breathing at the same time, just rolling and breathing. So it's almost like you're resetting the position of the shoulders in this upright position. And then with the knees bent, see if you can take your hand, one hand to the front of the pelvis and one hand to the back. And you're just going to take the awareness then into a tip and a tilt through the tailbone, tipping and tilting, and then come back to center. And just let the arms relax, release them, finding that neutral position for your pelvis. So notice if there was a natural kind of arching in the lumbar spine, more of a tendency to lock the knees and flip belly forwards, or maybe there's more of a tendency to tuck the tailbone and hold tension through the buttocks. So just see if you can bring that little bend into the knees, little soft bend without locking the knees, and allow the pelvis to find that neutral position. So somewhere in between, you can close the eyes and just let everything through this shape come back to what we would call a neutral position. And that's normally what's most quiet for you. So it's sort of the quietest way of being. Good. And just resting here. As we rest down through the soles of the feet, see if we can then connect to the space. Maybe now just taking the hands, one hand on the front of the belly, a little bit further up than the pelvis. So before we had the hands on the front of the pelvis and the sacrum. And now we're just going to drift the hands up a little bit around the waist, as if you were wearing a pair of high-waisted jeans. So sort of around the belly button region maybe. And take one hand on the front of the tummy and one hand on the back. And this is approximately the region for the third lumbar vertebrae. So from here and down, the feet ground into the floor and the pelvis rests down, grounding the weight of the pelvis through both legs. And then above that, there's an opposing force where the spine travels in the opposite direction. So see if you can both allow the feet to really root down as the crown of the head lifts nice and tall. So you're embodying the two opposing forces of gravity and ground force reaction. So there's this constant pulling apart, but gently grounding and reaching at the same time. So it's almost like heaven and earth. We're finding that sense of opposing forces, opposing polarities. And then just letting the hands dangle either side if you had them, on the front and the back body, just letting the hands release. And notice if your shoulders have then collapsed again, if the upper body has rounded, and see if you can bring your head back in alignment over the rib cage. And then all we're going to do is flow with our breath. So you're just going to step forwards with the right foot and put a bend in the right knee. And as you're doing this, you're going to take your hands and allow them to drift up on the inhalation, almost like there's two kind of helium-filled balloons, beautifully lifting and finding our way into warrior one. So the back foot, we kind of just exploring here, taking the awareness into the back heel. Don't just let that rest down. See if you can peel it up off the floor and let that back left leg loosen out of the left-hand side of the waist. So the left lung loosens off all the way up through the left ear and out through the crown of the head, loosening off through the left fingertips and then the right, keeping a bend in the front knee, making sure, and you might even want to look down, just glance down at your feet, make sure that they don't collapse. So there's a sense of grounding and relaxation through the feet without collapsing. There's a sense that the feet are still awake, but fully grounded. And then you're going to take your hands back to your sacrum, roll the shoulders back, and then we're going to find the front foot joined by the back foot. So you're stepping forwards with your back foot into chair pose. Notice if we hinge forwards at the hips, see if we can lift the crown of the head towards the sky and then bending deeper at the knees without collapsing through the feet. And we're going to step back with the opposite foot. So planting through the right heel without collapsing through the right arch, and then drifting the arms up to join that sense of lifting, reaching through the upper half of the body as we ground through the lower half, finding the breath coming into the rib cage, and really allowing the back foot to be that kind of tether. And you're going to flow back and forward, finding your chair pose, keeping the arms lifted if that's comfortable, and then stepping back with the opposite foot. Now, if having the arms lifted starts to introduce too much tension in the shoulders and the arms aren't ready for that, then taking the hands onto the back of the pelvis rather than on the front. So stepping forwards into your chair pose and then playing with chair pose. You may want to drift the arms up, momentarily taking them a little wider maybe. Maybe exploring going down and then taking the hands in front of the heart. So just taking the time to warm up, exploring a little flow between warrior one on one side and stepping into chair pose as your little option of a shape in between. And so it's really just exploring at your own pace and then coming back to a little stillness. So there's no rush. As you quieten down in whichever shape you're in, seeing if you can really just let your feet ground down. So there's a sense of sort of rooting down through the feet, this sense that lower half of the body is finding an earth point deep within the center of the earth, and the arms can lift, the upper crown of head reaches towards the sun, and we can flow between whichever shape we're in. Okay, and then we're going to come back to chair pose whenever you next finish your your warrior one, and then from there you're just going to fold forwards, releasing the hands towards the floor and letting the head dangle. So just coming into your first kind of forward fold, and maybe we haven't been there yet today. What's really nice to help the hamstrings, especially if we haven't practiced that much over half term, is just lifting the heels. So really finding that kind of buoyancy through the feet. There's that bouncy quality, that springiness, without letting the hands kind of go to sleep. See if you can loosen off the arms, always finding that kind of cooked spaghetti feeling through the shoulders. So let them hang, let them round out here. Let the hinge come into the hips. Let the head go. But keep the knees nice and bent and really allow the heels to lift. And then as you let the heels rest down, maybe you start to find a little bit more space in the back of the legs. And then we're going to find the hands walking forwards, or if you're at the top of your mat, your feet are going to walk back and you're going to work your way into a downward facing dog. Maybe the knees stay really nice and bent. And this gives us an opportunity to loosen off the shoulders, let the head go here, shake the head from side to side, feel that space. It's almost like the skull takes the spine into traction. So there's this sense of lengthening through the neck. And you can drop your knees back down to the floor and find your heels, your pelvis resting on your heels here with your toes tucked. Spread your fingers and find your breath. So quietly come back To the inhale, the rib cage gently lifts, and then as you exhale, maybe you soften everything to the floor. So there's this kind of universal sound, this sighing out, this gentle releasing. It's the sound of the universe letting go. It's a universal sigh. It's this softening and relaxing. And it's like every part of us really enjoys that. And once we found that in this shape, we can then rest deeply through the floor. And as the hands drop through the floor, we come back up to all fours with the knees on the floor, resting the hands through the floor even more. We lift the knees off the floor and come back into our downward facing dog. So just become really familiar with all four corners here. Just feel into the four corners of this shape. Maybe play if you notice that your feet are slightly narrower, taking your feet a little bit wider, taking the fingertips out as wide as the mat. So the baby fingers are coming as wide as the mat. Really ground down through the fingertips. So you're gripping the fingertips almost like you're scratching the mat. You can kind of literally scratch your hands and find that sense of connecting through the finger pads and the thumb pads, and then press down through the index finger as well. So there's the knuckle of the index finger often creeps up and away, especially if we're using one hand more dominantly for typing or writing. You might find that the hand is a little tighter, and you can just roll the wrist, lifting one heel of the hand and rolling that hand and letting that tension go, letting the hand coming over to the other hand and letting the hand really just kind of really become more in contact with the floor, almost like there's this kind of suction cup in the palm of the hand. And then same with the feet, so you can pedal your ankles and heels lifting. And then you're going to walk, so pressing down through the heels, resting them down, walk your fingertips back to your toes and find your way into your half forward fold. Taking a breath in, coming halfway up. So hands, as you inhale, come to the shins as your crown of head reaches long, coming halfway up with a flat back. Exhale, rounding out, letting the head go. Coming into that kind of floppy shape, drawing the belly button back to the spine to gently support the lumbar spine, and then bending the knees more deeply. You're going to drift your arms up again as you start to hinge back into your chair pose shape. Notice if your legs go into gripping and holding, which is probable, and just see if you can loosen them off a little. So we can be in this shape, but it feels spacious and quiet. There's a breath in, and it's as if the rib cage expands and the arms respond to that. There's a sense of the arms, the branches are just growing wider. And then as we exhale, we rest deeper into the feet. Maybe the hands come together a little more. They're not coming together, but they're just kind of ebbing and flowing, almost like we're breathing with our arms. And we can loosen off the shoulders and the rib cage using the limbs. So we could start to find in our chair pose a gentle opening out of the arms as we exhale, inhaling back to center, exhaling, opening, or finding your own rhythm. Exhaling, coming back to center, and maybe opening and inhaling as we open. And exhale back to center. So just exploring a little bent knee shape with a twist and finding not a collapse through your feet. See if you can keep your springy quality through the heels, resting down. Inhale back to center, and then exhale, fold forwards, half forward fold again, let the head go. And from your half forward fold, you can, or not half forward fold, it's forward fold, unless you're feeling dizzy or there's a headache or something, and then you can come in your half forward fold shape. Of course, that's very accessible for us, and always listening deeply. And then you're going to take your hands and pad them forwards and find your way back into your downward facing dog shape. So resting if you need to, you can drop your knees back to the floor and coming in and out, just pedaling the heels again. This time we're going to plant down through the right foot and then drift the left toes up towards the sky somewhere. So notice if you collapse through the arm, So if our right arm collapses, see if you can press down through the hands and draw the tailbone up towards the sky. And you can open up through your left hip, you can bend the left knee and draw the left knee up towards the sky as well. Exhale, drop that back down to join the right. Pedaling out for a breath or two, dropping your knees back to the floor if you need to. When you're ready, you can lift up through the right foot, playing with that. It doesn't have to be just static or held. Seeing if you can notice what happens through the arms. If the left arm is collapsed, plant down, pressing through the palm of the left hand out to the fingertips, bend the right knee, hinging open and exploring that. Breath nice and strong and deep. You're breathing into those spaces that may be holding, little dropping back down to your knees and then down into child's pose for a breath or two to rest. And as we come back to child's pose and resting, see if you can find that sense of that lovely sighing out, that little exhale where everything relaxes. So as we begin to find the balance between active and resting, we can use our practice to help us find that balance off the mat. So sometimes a more restorative practice is actually what's needed. And it's good to know that, especially if it's maybe, before bedtime and we're looking for creating a bit more of a transition space between work and home, especially if we're working in the same environment as home is. Then resting in this way with the hands either out in front of us or maybe to explore taking the fingertips down either side of the ankles can be helpful to help us find that sense of turning inwards and of restoring our energies and our focus. And as we're here in child's pose, you're letting the tailbone drop down towards your heels. Your knees can be nice and wide, or maybe you can draw the knees together, whatever feels most comfortable. And then if we've had the hands, palms facing up either side of the ankles in the more restorative shape, as we're here, we really rest down through the shins, through the crown of the head. If it's feeling a little tight through the back of the neck, just gently tucking the chin a little more to lengthen through the back of the neck. And then we're going to walk the fingertips forwards again and reach the fingertips out in the opposite direction to the sit bones. So we're lengthening through both sides of the body. And now we're going to keep the fingertips shoulder width apart and we're going to walk them over, carefully over to the right hand side, drawing back and down through the left sit bone. So creating a fanning shape, fanning out the ribs on the left rib cage, reaching from the left fingertip all the way down to the left sit bone, breathing into the space that you're creating here. And then exhale back to center, keeping the fingertips shoulder width apart and over to the other side, reaching the fingers long, reaching the arms long, breathing into that space through the right rib cage. Deep breath in, long, smooth breath out. And then we'll walk back to center. So drifting the fingertips back above the shoulders and then reaching the fingertips away from the sit bones, creating space through both sides of the body, resting the pelvis back down to the heels. And then we're inhaling, going to lift the pelvis off the feet and come back to all fours. We're going to find a little flow here. So we're reaching up through the left fingertips, turning our gaze towards the left, exhaling and rounding out, turning our gaze over towards the right, inhaling, drawing the belly button back towards the spine here to Find that, so we're not just holding tension in the abdominal wall, but we're finding a little bit of support through the lower belly region, a little bit of containment here. So you're finding the breath coming into the lower ribs, and again, just allowing the rib cage to loosen off into the shoulders, into the arms. Tucking the chin, keeping the neck nice and long, swapping over hands and coming to the other direction. Finding the movement nice and smooth with your breath. Inhaling and exhaling. Flowing at a pace that feels good for you. And softening around the face and the jaw. Good. And then we're going to come back to center, and we're going to find both hands planting down underneath the shoulders. If your wrists are unhappy, which they might be because we've been at our desks quite a lot, then taking the hands a little further in front of the shoulders. We're going to find some cat-cows here. So first we're going to just rest the belly towards the floor, and the crown of the head and the tailbone are going to lift. And then exhaling and sort of journeying in the opposite direction. So you find that drawing back and up through the spine, lifting towards the crown of the head, and then slowly going in the opposite direction. And as you're moving here, see if you can ripple this movement up and down the spine, letting the crown of the head and the tailbone be part of that journey. So you can flow at your own pace, and then as you're exploring this cat-cow shape, seeing if you can bring the movement into the shoulders and the hips. So it's almost as we come into our cow shape, with the belly dropping towards the floor, spine just kind of hanging out between the shoulders and the hips. See if you can broaden more across the sit bones. So it's almost like the two sit bones broadening across the collarbones, front of the shoulders, and then exhaling and rounding out, pressing the hands into the floor and creating a lot more space, that delicious space between the shoulder blades as they glide over the back of the ribs. Inhaling, little smile on your face, corner of the mouth, just flowing with what feels good for you. Then we're going to take the spine around in circles, and you're going to find yourself almost like you've got a barrel around your torso. So there's that movement which starts to feel good. It may not feel coordinated, doesn't matter, just see if it can feel good. And you might even want to just move instinctively here. So just starting to connect with that, almost like that movement, that wriggle movement, whatever it needs. Maybe snaking the pelvis back to the heels, tucking the toes. If that feels good, untucking the toes, coming back to a child's pose, and then up to all fours again. So just exploring what feels nice for this movement, and just enjoying your breath. So there's this real sense that the breath can start to come into those areas. We're not necessarily working hard, we're just kind of loosening up, allowing the breath to relax the body as the breath comes in deeper into the belly and the lower ribs. Good. And then we're just going to sit back. So just taking our weight into the heels as we come to kneeling. And if this is not comfortable, of course, you can quickly roll up a blanket and just place it underneath the front of the ankles. Just taking the weight off the hands. So being in all fours can be tricky if the wrists aren't used to it. So just taking your hands and just interlacing the fingers and then rolling the wrists. Coming back to your breath, so inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the nose, and then changing the direction of those movements. I can't do it backwards. Coordination's not there. We need to just practice and practice that. Good. Shake, 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 flick, 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 shake, 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 flick, flick, flick. So just letting that energy go out of the hands. And then we're going to take the hands, fingertips to the shoulders. And we're going to start to take the elbows around in circles. And of course, if sitting, kneeling like this is not comfortable, then come to a cross-legged position. And you're just going to start by taking the elbows around in circles. So we're keeping the spine nice and long. Crown of the head reaches up and we're moving through the shoulder joints. Start to feel a little bit of movement coming through the shoulder blades and then changing the direction of those circles. So just loosening off, warming up through the upper arms. And then we're just going to stop that movement. So just let the elbows drop down, release the hands, and then give yourself a little rotation like we were doing earlier. And you could be sitting down cross-legged for this or kneeling. And then we're going to find that coming to a little less movement. So just letting the arms come to smaller circles. And we're going to find some seated cat-cows. So as we exhale, we're going to round out, taking the hands to the thighs and turning our gaze down towards our belly buttons. Inhale, come in the opposite direction. Exhale. And you can move quite swiftly, or if you feel slower as needed, doing that too. So you're just starting to warm up, release that tension across the upper back with a bit of movement. Good. And then we're going to come back to center. So lifting the crown of the head, taking the fingertips back to the shoulders. We're now going to start the circles again. So taking the elbows together, but this time we're going to round out through the cat arch in the upper back. Inhaling, lifting, and then rounding out. So as your elbows come forward, your gaze goes down towards your belly, and then inhaling, lifting, broadening across the collarbones and lifting the heart as you take your elbows wide. Inhale, exhale, rounding out. And just a few more like that. And changing direction. Good. And then coming back to center. We're going to take some little side bends here. So if you'd like to, you can come off your ankles and come to a cross-legged position. And we're just going to sweep up through the left fingertips. So the first thing we're going to do is find that nice reaching. And maybe we lift up. It's almost like we can take the hand, opposite hand, to the rib cage and feel that space that comes up through the left arm. The left arm lifts up, space in the side body. As we drop down through the left sit bone, you can take your hand on the opposite side, making sure you're not rolling forwards through your left shoulder. Palm of the hands facing the center as we exhale and roll over to the side, reaching long through the upper arm without collapsing forwards. Good, and then back to center, over to the other side. So finding that space in the side body. So allowing the shoulder blade to follow as the fingertips reach towards the sky. Shoulder blade follows the upper arm bone as the fingertips reach. Lifting up, finding that space in the side body. Remembering not to collapse forwards as you come into your side bend. So we're looking for a nice side bend through the side body. You can turn your gaze down or keep the gaze up. And then back to center. Good. So let's just find a little seated twist here. We're going to do this with a flow. So as we inhale, sweeping the arms up, they're coming around the shoulder distance apart. Maybe that brings a little bit more tension here. See if we can maybe take the fingertips a little wider. And then exhale, just drop the fingertips down as we twist round to the left. And the gaze can follow. Maybe the rotation comes through the crown of the head, as you turn your gaze over your back shoulder without straining your eyes. Notice if you're leaning back or using your hands as levers. See if you can keep the weight into the sit bones rather than the back hand, and gently let the hands just rest. So we're not just trying to push ourselves into a twist. We can probably achieve a deeper twist, but we're pushing ourselves. And that creates tension. So it's almost like we lift tall on the crown of the head as we inhale. And then as we exhale, we release into the twist. Inhale, come back to center, drift the arms up. And then exhale over to the other side. So remember, not leaning back into the back hand, sitting nice and tall. Inhaling, creating space, almost like we grow taller on the inhale between each of the vertebrae. And then as we relax on the exhale, the spine starts to reveal how it's going to release. We'll come back to center, drifting the arms up, going over to the first side again. Notice maybe how different that feels, or just noticing the difference between the two sides. So that's often the case. We're looking at our spiral from the ground up, which we'll come back to in a moment. So these kind of spiral lines of connective tissue that come through the body. So here, just connecting with that through the belly button, around the whole of the torso, and out through the crown of the head, back to center. Breath in, and then exhaling, releasing into the twist. Turning your gaze over the opposite side. Notice if the arms have become levers. See if you can relax the arms a little as we sit forwards on the sit bones without collapsing back. So nice tall through the crown of the head, and then exhaling, releasing. Good. And then we'll come back to center. Okay, so we're going to find a little bit of work seated now. So taking the hands, maybe sweeping the flesh away from the buttocks. And we're going to look at Janu Shashasana. And if you need to, grabbing hold of maybe a tea towel or a strap, a yoga belt if you have one. What's also helpful is potentially lifting the pelvis a little bit, so putting a bit more height underneath the pelvis. But we're going to find a little bend in the knees, and then we're going to take one knee in towards us. And you may notice how you drop back onto the sit bones. So just go as far as you can with that foot. It doesn't have to be in by the groin, because if we do that, we might rock back. So it doesn't matter where it is. In fact, it really doesn't matter, because we're just going to let that knee drop out to the side. Your extended leg, we want the heel to be reaching out away from us, and then we're going to drop the fingertips behind us. So there's a tendency to push ourselves forwards if our fingertips are resting into the floor. It's kind of better to actually just turn the fingertips towards our pelvis. So we put a little bend in the elbows, and that just allows us to sit nice and tall through the crown of the head. Reach out through your extended leg, and then as you exhale, you're going to hinge at the hips and start to fold forwards from the pelvis. If you're able to, you can drop your hands either side of your front knee. If you're finding that that's not possible, because all of the movement has come from the upper back rather than hinging forwards at the hips, then I'd rather you stay with your hands behind you, because you're likely to get more of a release over time through the hips that way. If you're more open and you're able to fold forwards from the pelvis and the hips, keeping the upper body lifted and raised, so rather than trying to reach forwards and collapsing, we're going to take the time to kind of lift out of the pelvis. The sit bones draw in the opposite direction to your extended right heel. And as we inhale, we reach the toes up towards the sky. And then as we exhale, maybe we can soften and release a little more over the front leg. So Janu Shashasana means head to knee pose. I can assure you I'm not trying that. I'm, just letting everything soften. If you go too far, come back out. Like part of the journey is kind of feeling into that space. And then what we can do then is just come back, walk the fingertips back. So on an inhale, coming back up to upright spine. And then we're going to bend the right knee. So you're going to press the right heel into the floor as if you're pushing the floor away from you. And then draw the right heel back towards you as if you're scrubbing it towards and shortening the space between your pelvis and the heel. And you're going to start to feel the back of the right leg waking up there. So you're engaging the muscles here. Now what we're going to do then is press the right heel out away from us and then release on the exhale. And you may find that you're able to let go a little more. You may find that the back of the right leg releases a little more and you're able to come forwards with a little more ease. And what we're doing here is we're employing what's called the Golgi tendon reflex organ, the Golgi tendon organ, which is basically a feedback in the tendon of the muscles, that once we tense the muscles that we or send the signal to engage the muscles that we're then going to relax, it's easier for the brain. There's sort of a feedback mechanism that allows the brain to kind of go, oh, it's safe to let that muscle tension release. So you are very consciously letting that hamstring let go of tension. And that's the same with a lot of the shapes that we do. So just coming back up to center and releasing the opposite leg. So you can bend, if you're finding it really tricky, you can bend your front knee and put support underneath that knee. So swapping over, taking the opposite foot, so hand around the knee, and then taking that foot to the inner thigh and dropping the knee out to the side. Again, if you're feeling you're dropping backwards, using support, so grabbing a blanket or rolled up pillow, whatever it is to support that leg, and then, or your pelvis, sweeping the flesh away from the sit bones so that we can sit tall, extending out through the left leg. The toes are pointing to the ceiling. You can bend your knee and you could find that engagement first through the left heel, and then start to hinge forward. So fingertips are either pointing away from you. If you're finding yourself pressing yourself forwards through the upper back, then just turn the fingertips around, sitting nice and tall. Finding, it's almost like the rib cage lifts out of the pelvis as you hinge forwards from the hips. So again, we can come to a place and maybe we come out a little bit, maybe we wriggle and loosen off. Remind ourselves to gently tuck the chin a little to lengthen through the back of the neck. So again, we're coming forwards, hinging at the hips with a nice long spine. If you notice, just taking the time to kind of observe the difference between the two sides. Inhaling and exhaling and softening. And if you notice that this side is, well, more held, or maybe it's more open, it doesn't, it's just noticing that. There might be natural habits where we're habitually using one side of the body more, and that might be stronger, or it might be more open, or it might be more closed. It really depends. Very unique situation for everybody. Just noticing what in your body is showing up today. And then see if you can bend your left knee and scrub the heel like you're taking the left heel towards your hip. So you're really engaging and waking up the muscles on the back of that thigh and shin or calf. And then as you exhale, see if that can release a little bit further. And I feel like that for me has just definitely done that. So we take time, and often our practices can be quite fast, or maybe we just don't give the body time. As I said, I think I probably said a couple of weeks ago, it's very useful to have a more restorative practice, especially in these more dormant times. I know it's spring coming up, but it's a slower practice that just lets the body unwind. And we know that tension in our bodies and is so linked to our brains and our nervous systems. If you're anesthetized, you are limp. All of your body is incredibly relaxed. And so muscle tension is just, it's just the brain saying, I need to hold that. And we can kind of unprogram that by dwelling in these shapes a little more and reassuring, using our breath, reassuring the nervous system that we're able to relax in this shape. So we're certainly not pulling ourselves. There is one school of thought where you might be pulling yourself into this shape. And yeah, that might loosen off, but it's going to take probably quite a lot longer because we're introducing tension unnecessarily first. So we're creating that. As you inhale, come back to center. And that's slightly different to the Golgi tendon organ work that we were just doing. I sense we should just come onto our backs now. So just taking the time to roll down and I just feel like coming into a constructive rest pose with the hands on our belly for a moment or two, just letting the pelvis settle, feet flat on the floor, knees bent. Notice here if we've brought a bit of patterning through the upper back, maybe there's some tension there. So just tucking one shoulder and the other shoulder and just letting the front of the shoulders really relax. And you could just take your hand and just remind them to let go. And you could roll your head gently, feeling that weight through the back of the head and the neck. And there's this really kind of heavy, delicious rolling and sloshing of the brain. And then back to center. And then back to center. And over to the other side. And then back to center. Okay. And then we're just gonna take our awareness to our breath. Maybe gently closing the mouth and sealing the lips and just allowing the breath to come in and out through the nose. And then we're going to start to find the Viloma breath. So we're going to explore a little here where we inhale through the nose. All the way in, and then just sip a little more at the top of the breath. Pausing for a moment and then exhaling out of the mouth. So just let that kind of sigh out. And we'll do two more like that. Breathing in through the nose. Really expanding into the rib cage. Feeling down into the back of the lower ribs, the shoulders. Sipping that last little bit in right at the top. And then pausing if that feels comfortable. And then just sighing it out. Oh, it's giving me a yawn. And then same again. So one more deep breath in. And then breathing right in at the top. And then sipping, pausing, holding, just like almost like a blanket or a sheet that's just been kind of shaken. Just that moment before it starts to fall. The same with the breath, just letting that exhale go. Good. And then we're just going to take one hand to the kind of front of the chest and one hand on the belly. And we're going to now divide the breath into a couple of parts. So we inhale into the belly, pausing, and then inhale the other part of the inhale up into the ribs. And then just pause at the top. And then exhale ribs, pausing halfway, and exhale belly. So it's almost like we're sipping the breath in through a straw, inhaling through the nose, into belly. Gently pause and then sip the other part of the breath up into the rib cage. And then exhale ribs. Pause. And then exhale belly. Inhale belly. Pause. Inhale ribs. Pausing at the top, exhale ribs. Pause, exhale belly. There's no rush. You may find that your own natural rhythm starts to evolve. So I'll just leave us for a couple of rounds just to find our own pace. Inhale belly, inhale ribs, pausing at the top, pausing halfway up, exhaling ribs, exhaling belly. So just continuing for another couple of rounds at your own pace. And whenever you get to the next round, end of that, finishing the exhale, just allow your breath to return back to a natural rhythm. Just observing the difference between the two breaths. Okay. And then we're gently going to drift the arms up into space. So fingertips are kind of pointing somewhere up towards the sky, palms of the hands are facing each other. And just loosen off the arms a little and see if you can take the shoulders or drift the fingertips up overhead. So see what that feels like. Notice if the arms start to pull out of the shoulders and play with that a little, drifting the arms up as if you're reaching above your head. Maybe loosening off to one side and then back over to the other side. So you're sort of drifting. And as you're doing this, I'm just going to move down my mat a minute. We're going to find a little bit more of the reaching, fingertips up, and exploring how the fingertips connect all the way back down. There's a sense that the arm is not ending just at the shoulder. They connect back down, feeling into the back of the waist. So as you loosen off the right arm, feeling into the right waist, down through the back of the pelvis, and then over to the other side. So you're just going to reach up through one side and then up through the other. Good. Keeping going from side to side. Maybe you want to play with both sides spontaneously, kind of simultaneously, and just allow that movement to evolve a little as these sort of wings. So you're using the arms to loosen off into the rib cage, into the shoulders, feeling that connection to the back of the shoulder blades to the floor, feeling that movement. How maybe you can take your upper body into a little moon shape. So you reach the fingers over to one side, half crescent, and then over to the other side. And then we're going to come back to center and lengthen out the heels. So you're going to take your heels long on the mat, around the hip distance apart. And then you're going to take your right foot over your left, and then take your left, so your right foot over the left, and take your left hand around your right wrist, and then reaching over to the left with your upper body and over to your left with your feet. You're going to take yourself into a little half moon shape. So your hips reach over to the right as you're coming into your side bend, but allowing the shoulders to soften, keeping both shoulder blades in contact with the floor, so don't lift up, but reaching, finding that opening through the side body, and then back to center. You're going to swap over. So taking the opposite foot on top and then taking yourself over to the other side. And breathing into those spaces where you're creating space in the side body, feeling the ribs and the side of the waist. So it's almost like the pelvis reaches away from the shoulders and the fingertips reach away from the toes. So there's this lovely opening through the whole of the side body, from the outer ankle, outer little toe side, all the way up to the little finger side, pinky finger. And then back to center. We're going to bend the knees and plant the feet down on the floor. And then we're going to drift up into our bridge pose. So you just rest the feet through the floor and just start to loosen off the pelvis. You can lift the heels a little. And you can roll a few times, just coming up and down. Just feeling into a bridge pose with the arms loosening off. You can have nice and wide arms, almost like you're holding a really big beach ball. And it's like this connecting down through the forearms and the upper arms, and the palms of the hands are turned inwards. And you can roll your head from side to side. And then rest back down again. And draw your knees in towards your chest. And then you can take your knees out and around again. And back into center. And then we're going to find a little gentle twist. So you're going to drift your knees back into center and keeping the knees together and the feet together, drifting the arms in the opposite direction. You're going to just gently roll over the knees to one side as the fingertips drop in the opposite direction. So you're sort of hovering the legs. If it doesn't feel comfortable, you could drop the feet to the floor and play a little bit with connecting the toes back into the hip socket so that you can loosen off a little. But if you can hover and allow this to loosen off through the center of the rib cage and out through the shoulders and out through the fingertips and come back to center, so you don't have to rest in one side too much, but then exploring the other side. So you might notice a difference. You might notice how one becomes more held, or there's a tendency in somewhere for it to be a little more restricted, and maybe just playing with the feet coming in contact with the floor a little, keeping the knees nice and light, keeping the arms drifting out so they're like wings. So just at your own pace, just exploring side to side, playing with the gaze, maybe keeping all of the limbs centering back into the hips and the shoulders. So, you know, just having a little go on each side. Know which side for me is a little tighter. Feels very tight. Habitually, for some reason, there is a tension pattern in me, and it's always been the same, through my right lower back. So this is just an opportunity to sort of undo that automatic kind of gripping that comes in there. And it happens throughout the day. And these kind of rotations might reveal that to us. And we can stay and linger in a place a little longer, but just as long as it feels like it's sort of undoing the body. And feeling the breath here. So if we're there too long, then we might find that we get stuck. So you can come back to center and rest in a kind of different shape where maybe it's more symmetrical. So your knees can be drawn in. And then go back to exploring again, drifting the arms out and just sort of allowing the breath to reveal how it can sort of undo something that might have been holding on. And maybe it takes a little more time on one side than the other. You've just got plenty of time tonight just to explore that. Whenever you're ready, you can always come back to center and just rest. And so we're just going to find ourselves, once you've finished exploring, make sure you've done both sides kind of evenly, and then come back to center and then drift the right foot down. Oh, sorry, it's actually your left foot. So just drift your left foot, extend your left heel along the mat and just glance down and make sure that that's in line with the center of your left hip, and then take the right foot up towards the sky. So we've been working a little bit here, just taking little bit through the back of the hamstring. We're just going to find the left hand connecting with the right foot. So pressing out through the left heel, pressing out through the right heel, making sure the right foot doesn't collapse inwards. See if you can keep that foot flexed. So you've got your left hand over the top of the right foot, connecting to the little toe side. And then you're just going to loosen off. So we find that length through the crown of the head, welcoming the spine growing out tall, long, away from tailbone and heel. And then we can loosen off. So there's this kind of nice diagonal movement. Maybe the heel lifts up. Maybe we can allow the right hip to drop down as the right heel extends towards the sky. And we find the right leg opening a little. And again, it's just taking time here, letting the back of the head rest, tucking the chin, making sure that feels nice. And you could swap over your hands and maybe interlace both hands around the right foot. See how that feels. Or maybe it's not even around the right foot. Maybe that's not where we're at. Maybe it's around the back of the shin. So just exploring that. And then swapping over. So taking the right hand around the right foot and bending the knee and loosening off. And just giving that right leg a chance to kind of let go. So when we sit down for long periods of time in our more sedentary lifestyles, the hamstrings start to tighten up, and also with cycling and things like that, running, all of those things. So it's very good for the hamstrings to get this little reset, and it's really great for the left leg to extend long, and that helps the pelvis stay in neutral, so that when we release the hamstring here, it's coming from the body of the hamstring, not the kind of insertion or the origin up at the sit bone, down behind the lower leg. And we're just going to release the right foot and just let that right leg extend out, and you'll probably feel how it's slightly longer than the left. And then extending through the right heel, and this time drawing up through the left. So you can take your hand behind you. And then maybe finding your right hand over the top of the left foot on the little toe side. Maybe it's on the outer ankle. So wherever it is, you're sort of loosening off. So play with that. Extend out through your right heel. So you're making sure that the pelvis doesn't curl up out of neutral and your heel is reaching long. And then whenever you're ready, you can lengthen the left heel towards the sky, dropping down through the left-hand side of the hip. So keeping the upper body as relaxed as you can. And if that means bending your left knee, then that's great. That's going to allow the nervous system time to just kind of respond to that letting go that needs to happen. Soft around the jaw, soft around the face, maybe taking both hands around the foot or around the lower leg or ankle. Maybe then taking one hand around that foot. So you could try that. Releasing the diagonal and coming into, you may notice that if you go deep, you may notice that the leg starts to kind of switch into shaking, and that's going into new areas in the muscle. So just kind of relaxing into it. Let the left hip be heavy. Let the right heel reach long, and let the left heel reach long. So there's this lovely sense of kind of diagonal reaching and relaxing all at the same time. Back of the head is heavy. Breath is nice and smooth. And when you're ready, you can release the left foot and let that drift alongside the right. Okay, so we're just going to find our way over onto, so your feet flat on the floor, knees bent, and just roll over onto one side. And we're going to come up to sitting. And we're going to practice a few, I'm just going to turn the lights off because we're coming towards the end of the class, but I'm going to practice with you a couple of breathing practices. So, and then a meditation. And then we'll be seated for a moment or two for that, a few minutes, and then we'll come to final relaxation. So just making sure you've got enough layers on and enough warmth for you as we come towards a little more stillness. And coming to a comfortable seated position. So you may want to cross your legs or maybe sit, kneeling, whatever feels most comfortable. So what's great about crossing the legs or finding Sukhasana, which is kind of easy pose, this where the shins are crossed at the ankles or the shins, or where the ankles cross in front of one another, is that it really grounds down through the lower half of the body, and it creates that stable base for then the spine to lift nice and tall. So we have that nice alignment through the body. And we can rest the hands on the knees. And you might just want to just rock forwards and backwards a couple of times. So you're just gently kind of maybe side to side a little bit, just kind of easing into this base, maybe closing the eyes if you haven't done already. And just allowing yourself the chance to settle into this upright position. Having opened the body, we're ready now. The body is comfortable, relaxed and open and ready to just sit. And as we sit here, we now draw our attention as we close our eyes or soften the gaze, just drawing our attention inwards. Just noticing the breath. So soft around the jaw and gently inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the nose. So this is Ujjayi breath. And we're going to find a couple of rounds. So it's actually kind of counting from 5 up to 10 with our breath. So 5 rounds of the equalizing breath. And the equalizing breath is where we inhale for a count of 5, pausing at the top for a count of 5, exhale for a count of 5, and then the next round is inhale for 6, 6 and 6, and then 7, 7, 7. So we'll go through that. That's the equalizing breath. But for now, just watching your breath. And then as we finish the final round of the equalizing breath, we're then going to move into Brahmari breathing. As we did at the end of, I think we did this last term, like the end of last term, a couple of weeks ago. We're going to find the Nadi Shodhana, which is alternate nostril breathing with Brahmari breath. So if you're finding now that just sitting here, actually you need to kind of gain a little bit more support, I'm going to put a little bit more height underneath my pelvis. So just taking that time, because we're going to be here for a couple of minutes. So creating this space and maybe even gathering a blanket. I think it's quite nice just to gather a blanket. So I've come to kneeling, but you can be seated however is most comfortable. So we'll just begin with the Nadi Shodhana, the equalizing breath. Move to Nadi Shodhana with the Brahmari breathing. And to remind us before we begin of the mudra that we can take with Nadi Shodhana. So we can place the 2 ring fingers onto the space between the eyebrows, and then we get to close the right nostril, and then inhale through the left, and then swap over the nostrils. So we can do that together. And the most important thing there is just to allow the right elbow to be really kind of comfortable, the right shoulder to be relaxed. And using the fingertips on the space between the eyebrows can help the right arm to be soft and not hold tension. So we're going to just begin palms facing down in the lap or facing up if you feel like you want to kind of invite more receptivity. If you want to turn the palms facing down, inviting more sense of grounding. Just taking the time to choose now. And then we're going to begin by inhaling through the nose for a count of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And just pause for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pause for 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pause for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pause at the top for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pause. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale. 8, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pause. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And exhale. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then just sip a deep breath in. Pause at the top. And just exhale slowly. Let the natural rhythm return to your breathing. And just feel the benefits of that equalizing breath. And then we're going to begin taking the mudra by placing the 2 peace fingers on the brow of the forehead and gently closing the right nostril with your thumb and inhaling through the left. Pausing at the top. As we exhale, we're going to exhale through the right with the hum of the Brahmari B breath. Closing left nostril, exhale right. Inhale right. Exhale left. Inhale left. Pausing at the top. Exhale right. Inhale right. Pausing at the top. Exhale left. At your own pace, inhaling left. Exhaling right. Inhale right. Exhale left. Inhale left. That's the final round at your own pace. Inhale left. Sorry, finishing on the exhale on the left and just releasing the hands and letting your breath return to a natural rhythm. So releasing the Brahmari breathing, next exhale through the left nostril. Just allowing yourself to come back to a natural rhythm. Breathing, feeling the effects of the practice. And then we're just going to slowly add to a few moments of sitting here, a little mantra before we come to laying on our backs. The mantra or the meditation can be added to help us to connect with our naturally kind of loving center. And the words become a conduit to connect through to the heart. I shall see myself and all of life through the eyes of love. I shall see myself and all of life through the eyes of love. I shall speak to myself and all of life with love. I shall speak to myself and all of life with love. As we inhale, next, the mantra words repeat and change slightly. I shall hear myself and all of life through the sound of love. Just letting those words repeat, resonate through you. Powerful, connecting words. I shall hear myself and all of life through the sound of love. I shall see myself and all of life through the eyes of love. I shall speak to myself and all of life with love. I shall hear myself and all of life through the sound of love. And just let those words repeat silently inside, building the connection to your naturally loving, kind state. And then we're going to release that mantra. And maybe we stay sitting for the last few minutes, or if we prefer, we can come to lying on our backs. And just finding our way to Shavasana with the least amount of disturbance. Gently laying ourselves down. And coming back towards stillness. So for the last couple of minutes, these precious moments, just resting in our naturally open, restful state. Just allowing your awareness to drift. Quietly opening the awareness. Now we've had focus on our breath and then a mantra. For the last few minutes, just gently releasing that awareness and watching it, observing it freely. And you may notice that it's quite peaceful. If you notice that you do get caught in a thought in the past, future, just gently invite your attention back to your breath. No judgment, just inviting your awareness back. And here we're cultivating the connection to our awareness, to this present moment awareness. And then we'll just leave it there for today. You can just gently bring yourself back into your bodies, maybe taking the thumb and gently wriggling it across the tips of your fingers. If you're laying down, maybe you just briefly want to bring a deeper breath into the body by reaching the fingertips overhead. And then coming back up to sitting. So just exhaling. If you're not sitting already, using the hands to help you to come back to an upright spine. Keeping the eyes closed. Just taking a moment to acknowledge how you feel now after your practice. And we'll close our practice today with one beautiful Om. So the Om sound is A-U-M, and we begin with a kind of open mouth. It's Aum. Just let that resonating exhale reverberate its healing qualities through us. So let's take the fingertips down either side of the pelvis. As we inhale, we sweep the arms up, and we're going to exhale with our Om. Bowing our heads then towards our heart to honor that practice. Thank you for sharing that with me this evening. Namaste. So we can bring ourselves back out. There's no rush. And as always, if you need to